What's cracking, y'all? You are now watching Boo TV. Appreciate you for stopping in. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, stay notified, and let's get into the topic for today. What's cracking? What's cracking? What's cracking? Back with another one from the Wilt Chamberlain Vault. Go check out our Wilt Chamberlain playlist to see all the diverse Wilt Chamberlain content that we have covered. Starting to build up a library of Wilt Chamberlain stuff as we try to, uncover more about this guy, because especially like for him and Bill Russell and other players of their time, there's just not a whole lot of highlights on these guys. Feel like a lot of information is blurry as history continues to be history and the future continues to push right, and everything behind us to the left, if we're looking at it on a 2D scale, just starts to get a little bit more blurrier and blurrier and blurrier, especially when it comes to Wilt Chamberlain. He is a very divisive basketball player when it comes to how people view him on an all-time scale. It's very divisive. Now, so whenever I come across a video that can give me more information and put more things into their perspective and truth, I want to get into it, man. The ultimate Wilt Chamberlain video by a YouTuber called Johnny Arnett. Go check the channel out. I haven't looked at a whole lot of stuff, but I can see on like the recommendations panel of his channel, he has a lot more basketball content on there as well. And if I'm not mistaken, I was just browsing the internet that Wilt Chamberlain, I guess it's a documentary. Now, I don't know if it's a series or just one movie style documentary, but I think it launched on either Netflix or HBO. It's called Goliath, and it's about Wilt Chamberlain. But it was either Netflix or HBO Max. I know a lot of basketball documentaries have been popping up on HBO Max. That's what I have. I don't have Netflix, so any sports things that pop up on Netflix, I don't get to watch them because I don't have a Netflix account. Yeah, I canceled it years ago. But with no further ado, let's get into this Wilt Chamberlain Ultimate video. It's about an hour long, so sit back, relax, enjoy the show. Shout out to all the Wilt Chamberlain fans out there. Let's get it popping. Johnny Arnett.
I am quite excited because today's video is a celebration of the new Showtime documentary that's dropping today, called Goliath, the complete story of Wilt Chamberlain. As a way to celebrate this event, I made my own massive compilation video of my previous Wilt Chamberlain projects. With that being said,
So Showtime documentary, but can Showtime documentaries still go on other streaming platforms? I'm sure, right? There's no Showtime streaming service. I don't know. I'll find out.
Ever like to re-upload content, even if it's a compilation, without providing something that's completely brand new for my most faithful viewers. So in my pinned comment, you'll see timestamps to each different section and topic, including the brand new content about Wilt Chamberlain's near comeback to the NBA. So without further ado, please enjoy. This man had nicknames like Goliath and the Record Book for a good reason. He regularly had all-around performances that resulted in video game stat lines. The only reason why they don't blow our minds when we hear them is because we've already heard them so many times. Now, concerning Wilt's greatest games, he has many, but some are so insane that they demand all the attention and overshadow the others as a result. Everyone knows about his 100 points in 1962, his incredible quintuple-double game, his 55-rebound game against Bill Russell, and even his 78-point and 43-rebound game against Elgin Baylor and the Lakers. The thing is, Wilt has some other incredible performances that if they were achieved by literally anyone else, they would be immortalized in basketball history. But because it was Wilt that did it, it was just seen as another night and has flown under the radar. Today, we're diving into some of those games as we appreciate the greatest games from Wilt that no one talks about. First off, January 13th, 1962. when Wilt Chamberlain's Philadelphia Warriors defeated Walt Bellamy and the Chicago Packers 135-117. Wilt played all 48 minutes and dropped a ridiculous 73 points and 36 rebounds on 60.4% shooting. Wilt clearly only had one thing on his mind this night, as he didn't record a single assist. January 25th, 1960, when Wilt Chamberlain's Philadelphia Warriors defeated the Detroit Pistons 127-117. This was Chamberlain's rookie season, and he was still in his early 20s. But despite being the new kid on the block, he still dominated on a historic level, with 58 points, 42 rebounds, and 4 assists on 58.5% shooting. His 58 points is still the most points ever scored by a rookie in a single game, and his 42 rebounds is also the most by a rookie, with the exception of 3 other nights that eclipsed this total during that same rookie season. On February 9, 1969, Wilt Chamberlain's Los Angeles Lakers defeated the Phoenix Suns as he poured in 66 points, 27 rebounds, and 4 assists. Incredibly, he made 29 out of his 35 shots, which is a field goal percentage of 82.9%. In terms of field goal percentage, this is still the most efficient scoring performance in NBA history by a player with at least 60 points. This remarkable performance came pretty late in his career, as it was not only his last 60-point game, but it was even his last 50-point game that he would ever have. On February 2, 1968, Wilt's 76ers defeated the Detroit Pistons 131-121, and he didn't just have a triple-double on this night, but he actually got 2 triple-doubles worth in the same game, as he put up 22 points, 25 rebounds, and 21 assists on 69.2% shooting. To this day, Wilt and Russell Westbrook are the only 2 players in league history to achieve the 20-20-20 triple-double. March 31st, 1967, Wilt's 76ers defeated Bill Russell and the Celtics in Game 1 of the Eastern Division Finals, 127-113. Bill Russell is commonly known for outshining Wilt Chamberlain in the postseason, but this was certainly not the case in 1967, as Wilt dropped an unofficial quadruple-double of 24 points, 32 rebounds, 13 assists, and 12 block shots on 69.2% shooting. His 12 block shots were tracked by the respected Harvey Pollack, years before the league made blocks an official stat. If this quadruple-double was recognized as an official achievement, then it would still stand today as the only quadruple-double in NBA playoff history. And the fact that it came against arguably the greatest defender ever only makes it more impressive. On February 24, 1967, Wilt's 76ers defeated the Baltimore Bullets 149-118. On this night, Wilt had one of the greatest triple-doubles of all time, as he dropped 42 points, 30 rebounds, and 10 assists on 100% shooting. Yup, you heard me correctly. He didn't miss any of his 18 shot attempts, which is the most shots ever taken without a miss. It's unfortunate that we don't have his blocks numbers from this game. Otherwise, this stupid stat line would look even stupider. October 23, 1965, Wilt's 76ers defeated the Detroit Pistons 120-103. It was another insanely efficient night for Wilt, as he unofficially dropped 53 points, 21 rebounds, 2 assists, and 15 blocks on 84% shooting. The only unofficial part of Wilt's stat line is the block shots, which were once again tracked by Harvey Pollack. With the blocks, it's one of the greatest two-way performances of all time, and without him, it's still pretty darn incredible. February 25th, 1962. In the only loss on the list, Wilt's Warriors were defeated by the New York Knicks 149-135. On this evening, Chamberlain put up 67 points, 21 rebounds, and 1 assist on 65.8% shooting. Now this game by itself is incredible, but what's most significant about this performance is that it was the beginning of an incredible streak. Other than Wilt Chamberlain, no player in NBA history has ever scored at least 60 points in back-to-back games. Starting with this game, Wilt did this in 4 straight games, and the 4th game was 100 points. Unfortunately, Wilt really disappointed everyone when the streak ended in the 5th game, where he had an off night and scored only 58 points. The craziest part about this list is that there's so many games that didn't make the cut, and I could easily do a part 2 and a part 3. And to think that some people have the audacity to say that this man isn't in the top 10. So now it's your turn. What do you think is Wilt Chamberlain's most underrated performance? Let me know in the comments section below. The NBA has a deep...
Well, I'll say all of them are underrated. I mean, imagine popping off all these 60-point games, capping it off with 100, and after that you go to 58 and people looking at you like, just 58, bro, really? Just 58? I think a part of his game that doesn't get really recognized is that this man had a mid-range jumper, man. I mean, in isolation even, fade away. I think the people generally, when they think Wilt Chamberlain, they just think he's dunking everything. Everything's immediately at the rim. But this man could expand his game out, several feet from the basket and shoot.
Deep and rich history filled with many great players and with many all-time great performances. With that being said, some of the most impressive performances to ever take place have become lost through the passing of time. For example, many incredible performances weren't even caught on film prior to the NBA merger in 1976. For goodness sake, the highest scoring performance in NBA history was done by Wilt Chamberlain in Hershey, Pennsylvania in 1962. On that night, Wilt scored a jaw-dropping 100 points on 36 of 63 shooting. Unfortunately, the only people who were ever able to witness that performance with their own eyes was the few thousand people in attendance that day. This game was never caught on film. The closest thing we have is a radio broadcast. Now beyond that, some NBA games are even more mysterious than Wilt's 100-point performance. Prior to the 1974 NBA season, block shots and steals were not officially tracked by statisticians. If you look at NBA.com, Basketball Reference, StatMuse, or whatever page about basketball stats, you'll find nothing related to blocks and steals before the 1974 season. Due to this, we're left to speculate what was possible during that era. There are rumors of legends from the 60s achieving things on the defensive end that would seem utterly impossible by modern-day standards. But unfortunately, there's no way to prove with indisputable evidence that these facts were actually accomplished. Or is there? Maybe, just maybe, there was one man, one trusted source, a source more reliable than any other stat keeper of basketball history. And maybe very few people know about him and his work. As many of you have probably guessed, I know of this man. His name is Harvey Pollack. Harvey was no regular statistician, but rather he was the Michael Jordan of statisticians. Harvey worked in the NBA for a whopping 69 years that spanned from the very birth of the league until his death in 2015. During his remarkable career, Harvey had many different jobs and responsibilities. He was the PR director for the Warriors, he was a writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Associated Press, and the United Press International, and he did all of this while being an official NBA statistician. As a statistician, Harvey was way ahead of his time, as he was tracking shot distance, triple-doubles, and plus-minus ratings way before anyone else was paying attention to those details. Harvey was an eyewitness to some of the greatest games in basketball history and witnessed more games firsthand than any person watching this video. Among the games that Harvey witnessed was Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point performance. Not only was he the one who accumulated the stats for that legendary game, but Harvey was also the man behind the camera in what's arguably the most iconic image of basketball history. And it was Harvey's idea for Wilt to simply hold a piece of paper with a number 100 on it. To put it simply, Harvey was a professional and a highly respected individual within the association. This man has more credibility and has a greater impact on the game than just about anyone, and because of this, he was elected to the Hall of Fame. Now this is all cool stuff about Harvey, but at this point, you're probably wondering what I'm getting at in this video. Well, as I mentioned earlier, blocks and steals were not officially tracked until the 73-74 NBA season. But if that decision had been up to Harvey, the league would have been officially tracking those stats much earlier. Harvey understood the immense value of the defensive side of basketball, and because of this, he started his own personal stat keeping of blocks and steals as early as 1959. Obviously, being a statistician for the Philadelphia Warriors and 76ers, he was able to witness the career of Wilt Chamberlain and track his games completely statistically. Not all, but some of his box scores were saved, and are actually available to be viewed online if you know where to look. In total, we have 112 games available from Wilt Chamberlain's career that were tracked by Harvey Pollack. Today, I'm going through some of the most incredible performances in these 112 games. Let's get into it. On January 5th, 1960, against the Lakers, Wilt recorded his first of many triple-doubles involving blocked shots, as he scored 52 points, 20 rebounds, and 10 blocks on 53% shooting. A little over a month later, against Bill Russell and the Celtics, Wilt had 53 points, 29 rebounds, and 11 blocks on 57% shooting. A couple weeks later, he met with the Celtics again, and a rookie Wilt Chamberlain dropped 39 points, 25 rebounds, and 14 blocks on 44%. On November 24th, 1960, Wilt had his famous record-setting rebounding game. In that contest, he scored 34 points, had 55 rebounds, 4 assists, and 8 blocks on 36% shooting. On March 14, 1962, he had a monstrous triple-double with 34 points, 33 rebounds, 4 assists, and a whopping 20 blocks on 44%. Obviously, his 20 block shots would be an NBA record if those stats were official. A little over a week later, against the Syracuse Nationals in the playoffs, Wilt scored 56 points, 35 rebounds, and 12 blocks on 46% shooting. His 12 blocks would be an NBA playoff record. Next season, against Russell and the Celtics, he scored 43 points, 32 rebounds, and 12 blocks on 44%. On April 11, 1965, Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell had one of the greatest battles in NBA playoff history. In Game 5 of the series, Wilt scored 30 points, 21 rebounds, and 2 blocks on 56%. On the other hand, Bill Russell accumulated 12 points, 28 rebounds, 7 assists, 12 steals, and 3 blocks on 57% shooting. Russell's 12 steals would be a record in a regular season game, let alone an NBA playoff game, which is a record that seems impossible for a center to achieve. But I guess that just adds to his legendary defensive reputation. Let's carry on. On October 23, 1965, against the Pistons, Wilt dropped 53 points, 21 rebounds, and 15 blocks on 84%. A couple months later, against the San Francisco Warriors, he dropped 33 points, 30 rebounds, 8 assists, and 16 blocks on 59%. On November 8, 1966, against the Pistons, he put up 18 points, 24 rebounds, 4 assists, and 17 blocks on 62%. On March 31, 1967, it was Game 1 of the East Finals against Russell and the Celtics, and Chamberlain exploded for 24 points, 32 rebounds, 13 assists, and 12 blocks on 69% shooting. If these blocks were officially tracked, Wilt would be the only player to get a quadruple-double in NBA playoff history. What's crazy is that he would go on to get another one that same postseason. On April 16, 1967, in Game 2 of the NBA Finals, Wilt got 10 points, 38 rebounds, 10 assists, and 10 blocks on 40% shooting. He was 2 of 17 from the free throw line though, so hey, at least he sucks at something. On Christmas Day, 1968, against the Phoenix Suns, Wilt scored 15 points, 15 rebounds, 6 assists, and 23 blocks on 75% shooting. His 23 blocks would have broke his own NBA record of 20 blocks. So now, let's look at the 112 games as a whole. In all of Harvey's games where he recorded Wilt's stats, he averaged 8.8 blocks per game. That's nearly 3 times the average of the blocks leader in this past 2023 season. Out of these 112 games, 40 of them were triple-double performances that included block shots. That quadruples the NBA record, which was held by Dikembe Mutombo and Akeem Olajuwon. Speaking of quadruples, Wilt got 3 quadruple-doubles according to Harvey's records. At this point, some of you may be wondering where Wilt's legendary quintuple-double game is. Apparently, this game was also tracked by Harvey, but it isn't archived with these other 112 games. So in a sense, it's an even more unofficial game of these already unofficial games. Although I do think that one actually happened as well. It's easily the most impressive game of Wilt's career, if it is in fact accurate. Regardless, I think this video establishes that Wilt was a freak of nature, and it's gonna take more than removing a few games off his resume to convince me otherwise. To take your own look at Harvey's stats for Wilt Chamberlain's games, I posted a link in the video's description. So what do you guys think? What do Harvey's numbers say about Wilt and the era he played in? Let me know in the comments section below. Wilt the Stilt Chamberlain. One of the most fascinating players that's ever been. He was my grandfather's favorite player, and he's the man who holds more NBA records than any other player in league history, and it's not even close. Chamberlain officially holds over 70 NBA records, and if blocks, steals, and offensive rebounds were accounted for in his era, he would hold so much more. He dominates the league's record book to such an extent that one of his many nicknames is in fact the record book. Basketball history as we know it has this man's face all over it. But what if he never existed? Now all of a sudden, many of your favorite players own the league records, and you may not have even known that they were on the list. I'm not going to look at all 70 plus records from Wilt, because I would like this video to not be an hour long, but I will take a look at 15 of his most noteworthy ones, starting with some of the most obvious ones. Number 1. Wilt Chamberlain holds the record for the most points scored in a single game with 100 in Hershey, Pennsylvania in 1962. This was the same season that Wilt averaged over 50 points a game, which of course we'll get into more later. Now, with Wilt no longer in the picture, Kobe Bryant takes the NBA record when he scored 81 points against the Raptors on January 22, 2006. He did it on 28 of 46 shooting, and the craziest part is that it isn't the only record he would own from that night. Number 2. Wilt scored 59 points in the second half of the 100-point game against the Knicks, but Kobe scored 55 points in the second half against the Raptors, which now is also an NBA record with Wilt out of the picture. Number 3. Wilt holds the record for the most points ever scored in a single game by a rookie. In January of 1960 against the Detroit Pistons, he dropped 58 points on 24 of 41 shooting and 10 of 13 from the free throw line. Fun fact, he also snagged 42 rebounds in this same game. Quite the first impression from a young Warriors center. Anyway, with Wilt now out of the equation, the rookie record goes to another Warriors player just 5 years later, when overlooked legend Rick Barry dropped 57 points against the Knicks in a 4-point loss. He was 18 of 29 from the field and 21 of 22 from the free throw line. Number 4. Wilt holds the record for the most total points scored in a single season with 4,029, which was the same season he averaged 50.4 points. Now, the new record holder is the only man who's ever come within 1,000 points of Wilt's 1962 total, which was Michael Jordan in the 86-87 season, where he scored a total of 3,041 points. In case you're curious, Jordan averaged 37.1 points that season and finished second in the MVP voting. Number 5. Wilt Chamberlain holds the record for the most 50-point games. Over his career, he had a total of 118 games. This new record holder is also Michael Jordan, as he had a career total of 31 50-point games over the course of his career. Number 6. Wilt holds the record for the most 60-point games as well, with 32.
That would be Kobe.
That means Wilt has more 60-point games than Michael Jordan has 50-point games, which is pretty crazy. Regardless, the new record holder with Wilt no longer around is actually once again Kobe Bryant, who managed a total of 6 60-point games over the course of his career. Number 7. Wilt holds the record for the most 70-point games in league history with a total of 6 games. There are 5 other players who now share that record at 1 game apiece: Kobe Bryant, David Thompson, Elgin Baylor, David Robinson, and Devin Booker. Really quick, I want to make sure you understood what that meant. Wilt Chamberlain has more 70-point games than every other player in NBA history combined. If that stat doesn't make your brain go, then I don't know what will. Number 8. Wilt holds the record for the most field goals attempted in a game without a miss with 18. He also holds the second and third spot with 16 and 15. But now that he's been wiped from history, 4 players share that record at 14 shots, which are Thomas Bryant in 2018, Gary Payton in 1995, Billy McKinney in 1978, and Bailey Howell in 1965. Number 9. Wilt holds the record for the most rebounds in a single game with a ridiculous 55 in a 3-point loss against Bill Russell and the Celtics in 1960. The new record-holding performance happened just a couple months later when Bill Russell secured 51 rebounds against the Syracuse Nationals in 1960. Although Wilt was often recognized as the rebounding king throughout the years, it was often a theme for Bill Russell to be not too far behind him. Number 10. Wilt holds the record for the most rebounds in a playoff game with a total of 41, which he accomplished against the Boston Celtics in 1967. Now the new record holder is his good friend and rival, Bill Russell, who managed to get 40 rebounds in a playoff game on 3 separate occasions. Number 11. Wilt holds the record for the most total rebounds in a single season with a total of 2,149, which he accomplished in 1961. Incredibly, Wilt holds the top 7 seasons in NBA history for the most total rebounds. Now the new record holder is once again Bill Russell, who pulled down 1,930 boards in 1964. Number 12. Wilt holds the record for the highest points per game average for a single season. This came in his legendary 1962 season where he averaged 50.4 points. Now the new official record holder is Michael Jordan, who averaged 37.1 in 1987. Some of you may bring up Elgin Baylor's 1962 season where he averaged 38.3 points. But technically, this season isn't recognized on most lists because he only played 48 games that season, and the minimum to be recognized is often 50 games. Number 13. Wilt has the highest scoring average in a single season by a rookie at 37.6 in 1960. The new record holder is a Hall of Famer who doesn't get talked about enough and may need his own video at some point. The 6'11 center Walt Bellamy averaged 31.6 points in his rookie season as a member of the Chicago Packers in 1962. Number 14. Wilt has the highest assists per game average in a single season by a center when he averaged 8.6 assists in 1968. Interestingly enough, the highest assists per game seasons by a center from someone not named Wilt Chamberlain was actually these past 3 seasons from the Joker, Nikola Jokic, who put up 7.3, 6.1, and 6. Number 15. Wilt holds the record for the most seasons leading the league in minutes per game with a total of 9 seasons. This was a testament to his incredible conditioning and alien-like stamina. The new record holder is another guy who had a constant motor, and that's Philadelphia great Allen Iverson, who led the league in minutes per game a total of 7 times. They basically stand alone in this area as no one other than Wilt and Iverson have done it more than 3 times. These are just 15 of Wilt's records going elsewhere, but the list goes on and on. Let me know in the comments section which one of these you think is the most interesting. Also let me know which one of Wilt's 70+ records do you think is the most unbreakable. The day is March 2nd, 1962. Nearly a lifetime ago, and yet still somehow it remains the greatest scoring performance of NBA history. Around the organization and among the basketball community, this day started just by feeling like any other usual day in the league. On this particular evening, Wilt Chamberlain's Philadelphia Warriors were scheduled to take on the 27-45 New York Knicks. This epic game would be taking place in a humble town known more for its chocolate than its basketball, Hershey, Pennsylvania. This game would be held at Hershey Sports Arena, a small building that can seat only slightly over 4,000 people. Now there is absolutely no visible footage of this game. A man named Harvey Pollock was the only writer who was covering the game, because like I mentioned earlier, nothing felt special or different about tonight's game, and press members didn't want to take a bus ride from New York to Little Hershey, Pennsylvania on a Friday night for simply a regular season game with almost no playoff implications. Little did they know how much they blew it on that decision. At the time, Harvey was the PR director for the Warriors, he was the game statistician, the writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer, a writer for the Associated Press, and a writer for United Press International. Harvey said he had been in the NBA for 65 years, and this was easily the busiest evening of his life. Now heading into this game, Wilt was absolutely destroying and dominating the league like no one ever has. He was averaging an absurd and difficult to fathom 50.8 points per game on the season heading into this evening. To put that in perspective, Michael Jordan is second all-time in 50-point games with a total of 31 over his career. Wilt did it 45 times in this season alone. Just a few weeks before this game, Warriors head coach Frank McGuire had sarcastically joked that Wilt would probably score 100 soon. Now, according to Wilt, he had a date the night before, and he also struggled with insomnia, so he had basically got no sleep the night before. You would think that this would be a recipe for a poor performance, but instead, the performance would be quite ironic. Just hours before the game, Wilt was playing arcade games involving toy rifles, and he couldn't miss anything. Wilt said that he saw this as a sign of things to come. With that being said, Wilt normally tore up the New York Knicks, but the stage was set for him especially on this night. It would take a rotation of players to defend Wilt, because he was the pinnacle of stamina and he was averaging 48.5 minutes per game on the year. Wilt literally played every single moment of every single game that he was eligible to play for that entire season. He never went to the bench, other than a single instance where he had been ejected by the referee. Phil Jordan was the usual 6'10 starting center for the Knicks. Phil was listed as a scratch because of a quote sore shoulder, but according to his teammates, he had been partying the night before and was puking from the hangover just hours before tip-off. Darrell Imhoff was the 6'10 backup center, but he was a skinny player who was no match for the beast that is Wilt Chamberlain. Behind Imhoff was the 6'8 power forward named Cleveland Buckner. Whenever Imhoff would be resting, it would be the significantly smaller Buckner whose job it was to slow down Chamberlain. Spoiler alert, he fails miserably. Finally, the game is underway. And remember how we talked about Wilt being in a zone when he was playing the arcade games before the game? Yep, it translated onto the court. After the first few minutes, the Warriors had zoomed out to a 19-3 lead, with Wilt making all of his first 5 shots. The Knicks could tell early on that they were in for a long night defending Wilt. Throughout his career, he usually kept his shots close to the basket, but Wilt was so on point that night that he said he extended his range to jumpers as far out as the top of the key. When New York threw several players at Chamberlain and they all continued to fail, they then turned to their only other option, which was repeatedly fouling him and sending him to the line. Only one problem. The typically terrible free throw shooter in Wilt wasn't missing basically anything this night, including the free throws. Wilt made an incredible 28 of his 32 free throws this game. It's worth noting that for his career, Wilt Chamberlain was statistically a worse free throw shooter than the famously terrible Shaquille O'Neal, and yet, Wilt still shot 28 of 32 on this night. That alone should tell you the kind of zone he was in. By halftime, the Warriors had a 79-68 lead, and Wilt was sitting at 41 points. It wasn't uncommon for Wilt to head into halftime close to this point total, but during the halftime meeting, Wilt's teammate Guy Rodgers and their head coach Frank McGuire agreed that they should feed the ball to the Big Dipper just to see how much he could get. As a result, Wilt's rate of scoring increased, and he dominated throughout the entire third quarter, in which he scored 28 points, moving his total at the end of the third quarter to 69 points. Entering the fourth quarter, and the game is turning into a blowout, with the Warriors holding a 125-106 lead. Wilt had his eyes set on 2 scoring records, and both were already his. When he passed 73 points, he broke his record for the most points ever scored in a regulation game. When he passed 78 points, he broke his record for the most points ever scored in any game.
133 to 118. History being written tonight in Hershey. The big man has broken the record and he's gone for more.
He had 79 points with around 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter. From this point on, Dave Zinkoff, the PA announcer of the Warriors, is announcing Wilt's point total to the entire arena after each basket.
You know what's in the fans' mind? They're thinking of the magic number, 100.
It was evident to all the Warriors fans and players that the goal was 100. It was also evident to the Knicks players, who did not want to be on the wrong side of history. As Wilt's total continues to climb, there begins to be head games within the game itself. Knicks are down by 20 points with only 4 minutes remaining. For the Knicks, it's not even about getting a win anymore, because the outcome is already decided. It's all about stopping Wilt from reaching 100. The Knicks began to freeze the ball and tried to eat clock each time it was their possession. The Warriors players began intentionally fouling the Knicks to get the ball back to Wilt for more opportunities. Then when the Knicks were on defense, they started fouling the Warriors guards on purpose to send them to the free throw line. That way Wilt can't get any more opportunities to score. The Warriors players then countered by playing hot potato with the basketball and by getting the ball to Chamberlain by any means necessary as quickly as possible. Despite an entire roster whose sole mission was to stop Wilt from hitting the century mark, they still couldn't slow him down.
What?
And then, with Wilt sitting at 98 points with just under a minute remaining in the game, the historic moment takes place.
167 to 146. Now let's see if they found somebody quick. Rogers throws long to Chamberlain. He's got it. He's trying to get up. He shoots. No good. The rebound, Luckenbill. Back to Chamberlain. He shoots up. No good. In and out. The rebound, Luckenbill. Back to Rucklick. Into Chamberlain. He made it. He made it. He made it. A dipper dunk. He made it. The fans are all over the floor. They stopped the game. People are running out on the court. 100 points for Wilt Chamberlain. They stopped the game. People are crowding, pounding him, banging him. The Warrior players are all over him. Fans are coming out of the stands. 46 seconds left. The most amazing scoring performance of all time. 100 points for the Big Dipper.
Among the 1 billion other crazy things that this man has done, the 7'1" center did play basketball at the point guard position. It's widely known that he once led the NBA in overall assists, but he actually started at center during that season. So that's not the instance I'm talking about. It was actually as a member of the Harlem Globetrotters in the late 1950s. Alright, I get it. The fact that he was on the Globetrotters makes it a little less impressive, but it still speaks volumes about Wilt Chamberlain's skill set.
Right.
The reason for it was the fact that Meadowlark Lemon and Wilt Chamberlain were both usually playing at center, so the coach decided to start Lemon at center and move Chamberlain to the point to take advantage of his solid ball handling, passing, and perimeter shooting. As far as any form of professional basketball goes, I'm not sure if there's ever been a bigger player to play the point guard position than Wilt was. In the final season of Wilt Chamberlain's career, he was 36 years old. His Lakers made it all the way to the 1973 NBA Finals, where they lost in 5 games to the New York Knicks. That season, Wilt only averaged 13.2 points per game, but he did lead all players in rebounding with a whopping 18.6 per game, and he led all players in field goal percentage at an astonishing 72.7%. He was also second among centers in assists per game at 4.5. And if block shots had been tracked that season, then he likely would have led the league in that stat as well. He also participated in all 82 regular season games, while playing 43.2 minutes per game, which was third in the league overall. In his very last NBA Finals game, he played all 48 minutes and dropped 23 points and 21 rebounds on 56% shooting. I think you guys get the point. Although Wilt Chamberlain retired at the age of 36, he still appeared to have a ton of quality basketball left in the tank, considering how he was still among the best in many different categories. Now here's the other thing. Even years after his retirement, Chamberlain remained obsessive about his personal fitness. Even in his mid-40s, Wilt Chamberlain appeared as if he was as good or even in better shape than when he was when he retired. Because of this, Wilt continued to draw attention from NBA teams, even well beyond the age that is normally considered as father time. According to a comment by Wilt in 1991, many teams tried to get him to come out of retirement. The Bulls, Nets, Mavericks, Suns, and Clippers all contacted him, and the Knicks and 76ers contacted him twice. But none of those teams were closer to actually convincing Wilt to return than the Cleveland Cavaliers. It was the summer of 1979, and the Cavaliers were coming off of a disappointing 30-52 season. But the thing is, they had just hired a new head coach by the name of Stan Albeck. Chamberlain had an existing relationship with Stan, and Wilt had a tremendous amount of respect for him as a leader and a coach. So the idea of joining forces did entice Wilt. Chamberlain also said that he was intrigued by the idea of returning to the NBA because he was already in the Basketball Hall of Fame, and no player has ever played in the NBA while he was already in the Hall of Fame. Wilt Chamberlain would have become the first. According to the Cavaliers owner at the time, he believed they could build a championship team with Wilt Chamberlain as the centerpiece. Discussions were ongoing between Wilt and the Cavs, but unfortunately, these discussions somehow got leaked to the media, And this sloppiness strongly annoyed Wilt, who usually likes to keep these types of discussions behind closed doors.
Sounds just like Kawhi Leonard style. It's what Kawhi Leonard would do.
According to Wilt, if he had played on the Cavaliers, he would have focused on rebounding and defense, but he was also focusing on becoming a reliable three-point shooter, which is something that was never possible in his prior playing days. As the proceedings began to become more certain, the Cavs started preparing a 2-year contract for Chamberlain. There was a problem though. When Wilt Chamberlain initially retired in 1973, he still had 1 year left on his contract with the Los Angeles Lakers. So the assumption was that if Wilt wanted to return to the NBA, it was going to have to be in a Lakers uniform. But that's when the Lakers owner Jerry Buss stepped in. Buss said that he would waive any rights he had to Chamberlain if Cleveland wanted to sign him. On November 20th, 1979, Buss said this to the Associated Press: "I think it would be great for the NBA if Wilt were to play, and I do not want to put anything in the way of this happening. I would enjoy seeing him play again, so I'm sure thousands of basketball fans would as well." Now, there were no obstacles. The path was completely clear for Wilt to make a historic return to the NBA, in a situation he would be happy with. In November of 1979, Wilt had a 3-hour meeting with the Cavaliers' upper management, which was soon followed up by a phone call. Afterwards, Cavs management said that they were very confident Wilt was going to sign very soon. But the Cavs found the absolute worst moment to be sloppy yet again. After some time, they were waiting to receive confirmation from Chamberlain, and they were growing impatient. The Cavaliers then sent their general manager to hand-deliver Wilt Chamberlain's contract to his home in Bel Air, California. But the thing is, Wilt wasn't home, so the GM decided to stick the contract in the fence by the gate of his estate. A while later, when Wilt Chamberlain got home, he saw a bunch of papers blown all over his front lawn. Winds had come and made an absolute mess of the contract. Wilt was furious about this and felt extremely disrespected. He then called his friend and the Cavaliers head coach, Stan Albeck, and told him, "Forget it. I can't play for a team that handles its business like that." And just that suddenly, all of the anticipation of Wilt Chamberlain's return to the NBA ended on the... We'll never know what Wilt Chamberlain in his mid-40s could have achieved in the NBA. Could he and the Cavs have competed for an NBA championship? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below.
Michael Jordan, Russell Westbrook, and LeBron James. These are some of the names that get consistently brought up whenever there is a discussion about who is the greatest athlete in NBA history. I'm not talking about their accomplishments as a player or even their skill set, but just about pure athletic ability. Strong arguments can be made for each of these players, but to me, none of their abilities stack up against my candidate for the title of greatest athlete in NBA history. Now, to be considered for this title, a player needs to have a combination of impressive traits. He must be fast, he must be strong, he must be quick, he needs to be able to soar through the air with his incredible leaping ability, and finish with remarkable power at the rim. He needs to have athletic abilities that are awe-inspiring to both fans and his teammates. One man embodied these skills more than any other player in NBA history: Wilt Chamberlain. Now, before you start to rage and spam the comment section with all your disagreements, let's first take an in-depth look at the man Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt the Stilt is one of the most controversial players in all of NBA history, despite the fact that throughout his career he continuously put up otherworldly numbers. Fans continuously have a difficult time agreeing about anything regarding this man's marvelous career. He's a 2-time NBA champion, a 4-time league MVP, 13-time NBA All-Star, 7-time All-NBA First Team, 7-time scoring champion, 11-time rebounds leader, and 1 year he led the NBA in assists just for the heck of it. He averaged 50.4 points per game and 25 rebounds per game in 1962, and he scored 100 points in a single game. Wilt literally holds more NBA records than I have time for in this video. This freak of a man dominated the NBA statistically like no player has in the history of the game. Numerous fans, often of the older generation, still see Wilt Chamberlain as the NBA's greatest player of all time, and yet there is a large number of fans who think that at his best, Wilt Chamberlain would be just an average center in today's NBA. So why is this? Why is it with all of his awards and achievements, spectators, fans, and analysts can't come to an agreeable conclusion on just how great Wilt Chamberlain was? Well, for one, the NBA in the 1960s and early 70s was very, very different from today's NBA. Many feel that the modern athlete is greater than athletes of generations past. There is definitely some truth to this. With modern technology and training methods, today's general athlete is stronger and faster than his predecessors. I never like this argument, though, when used against athletes of the past, because even if Wilt Chamberlain played in today's NBA, wouldn't he be able to use the same equipment, supplements, technology, and training methods to further enhance his abilities? Of course he would. If anything, this argument just makes me more impressed with what Wilt was able to do without modern technology. So
I've seen enough Wilt Chamberlain highlights to get a decent sample size of his athleticism and some of his actual feats. So even without the modern medicine and the technology and the equipment and the supplements, even without all that, the version of Wilt, the true version of Wilt that existed, you still drop him in today's league, and you would still be hard pressed to find a better athlete than Wilt Chamberlain without all the modern medicine and everything. The things this guy was doing, just snatching people's shots out of the air, then taking off as the point guard, basically grabbing a rebound and just running past everybody on the opposite end of the floor. Like, his speed was crazy. His long strides was crazy at his height. And be able to finish, handle the ball, jump out the gym, snatching people's shots out the air, bro. No, this dude was a freak ass. This guy was a freak athlete. You take that version of him, no modern anything, and just drop him in today's NBA, he would still probably be the best athlete in the NBA. Like, I've seen enough video evidence that he's arguably the most athletic player ever. And when I think of the most athletic players I've ever seen, I'm throwing Wilt in there. I'm putting Bill Russell in there. Bill Russell could have very well been an Olympian, as well as Wilt. I'm throwing Russ in there. I'll put Russ in there. I'll put LeBron in there. I'll put Michael Jordan in there. I'll put Derrick Rose when he wasn't injured in there. I have to put Vince Carter in there. Who else am I missing? There's somebody else. Giannis Antetokounmpo. I have to throw Giannis Antetokounmpo in there. I mean, come on, man. But Wilt comes to mind, and I would not argue with anybody if they think he's the most athletic player we've ever seen in the NBA. I wouldn't argue it, and they're probably right. They're probably right.
So yeah, I was never a big fan of this argument. And second, what doesn't help Wilt's case and makes him seem more like a myth or a fairy tale legend was the fact that the guy might have been a little bit of a self-promoting exaggerator. Wilt, it's the year 1997. How many points would you average in a game in today's NBA?
I honestly think that if I played right now versus my time, I'd have 70 points more.
70 points? As in 7-0? Wow, that's impressive, Wilt. How about your amazing vertical leap? Just how high are you getting off of your jump?
I'm getting 50 inches off of the ground on a vertical. I'm getting 50 inches off of the ground on a vertical.
50 inches? So Michael Jordan, Spud Webb, and Vince Carter and their mere 40-inch vertical leaps got nothing on you? Well, that's crazy, Wilt. You know that Michael Jordan guy was pretty good too. How would he have done if he had played in your playing days, Wilt?
You think he'd have been crushed, is what you're saying?
I don't think. I know you've been crushed.
I see. I imagine you get a lot of ladies being as impressive as you are, Wilt. How many women do you think you've slept with?
20,000.
20,000, right.
Needless to say, everything that came out of Wilt's mouth had to be taken with a major grain of salt. There are other crazy stories that others have said about things Wilt Chamberlain was able to do, but I won't be touching on all of those because honestly, some of those are hard for me to believe. I have a hard time believing that Wilt Chamberlain fought off a mountain lion with his bare hands. I have a hard time believing that Wilt Chamberlain dunked a basketball so hard that he broke the defender's toe with a basketball when it struck his foot. You see, it's easy to see why people in today's day have such a difficult time taking his achievements seriously when it's so hard to take anything Wilt said about himself seriously. But even with all of that being said, and many of those stories aside, I still believe there is an overwhelming amount of evidence that prove that Wilt Chamberlain was the most incredible athlete in NBA history. The evidence takes us as far back as Wilt's days in high school. In his early years, Wilt wasn't too interested in basketball, claiming it was a game for sissies. His original passion was actually track and field, and in it, he dominated his high school peers.
High jump.
As a 6'11" freshman in high school, Wilt began to display his amazing athletic abilities. He high jumped 6 feet 6 inches. He ran 440 yards in 49 seconds. His shot put was measured at 53 feet 4 inches, and he broad jumped 22 feet. For those of you who don't understand track and field measurements, just know that these measurements were incredibly impressive, especially when you consider that they were done by a 6'11" high school student. Wilt eventually fully turned to basketball, but not before continuing his track dominance into his college days. As a Kansas Jayhawk, Wilt ran a 40-yard dash in 4.6 seconds. To help put that in perspective, LeBron James ran a 4.6 in 2012, which was the prime of his career. Wilt Chamberlain in college was as fast, if not faster, than a prime LeBron James. Wilt ran a 100-yard dash in 10.9 seconds, shot putted 56 feet, triple jumped over 50 feet, and he even won the high jump in the Big 8 track and field championships 3 years in a row. Several teammates throughout Wilt's career said that Wilt could jump so high that he was able to grab a quarter off the top of the backboard. All of these athletic abilities Wilt displayed were utterly remarkable, but to do them as a man of his stature, as a 7'1" powerful tower of a specimen, is completely unheard of. These incredible accomplishments show the speed, agility, and leaping ability of Chamberlain, but one of the qualities he was most revered for was his power. There are an insane amount of stories concerning the monstrous displays of strength from Wilt. On several different accounts, people said that they witnessed Wilt bench press 500 pounds, although according to Wilt, he could do 600 pounds. Again, take that with a grain of salt. He could deadlift 625 pounds and clean and jerk nearly 400 pounds. Former player and opponent of Wilt, Paul Silas, said this about an interaction with Wilt on the court. All of a sudden, I felt an enormous vice around me. I was 6'7", 235 pounds, and Wilt had picked me up and turned me around and said, "We're not going to have any of that stuff." Also, Bob Lanier, a 6'10", 270 pound center who was often burdened with the task of guarding Wilt, was asked in a questionnaire what was his most memorable moment of his entire career, and Lanier said, "When Wilt Chamberlain lifted me up and moved me like a coffee cup so he could get into a favorable position." One of Wilt's many nicknames was Goliath.
Let me just say, Bob Lanier, it's a big boy. It's a big boy. And I'm just really finding all that out, how big Bob Lanier was, as I just put out a video about Bob Lanier. You can check that out as well.
And he certainly lived up to it. His astonishing strength, speed, leaping ability, and quickness alone would be enough to give him the title of greatest NBA athlete to ever live. But he had another quality to even further his legend, and that was his unmatched stamina. In today's modern NBA, players take regular breaks throughout games to sustain themselves and preserve some energy for the moments that matter most. In fact, many of the league's premier players have been known to take entire nights off to protect their health and preserve themselves for the playoffs. Many often referred to it as load management. This concept would have been laughable to Wilt Chamberlain, who very rarely needed to take any breathers. For example, in the 1962 NBA season, the same season he averaged 50 points and 25 rebounds, Wilt Chamberlain averaged a staggering 48.5 minutes per game. That's an average of more minutes than there are in a standard 48-minute game. This was possible because of the overtime games he played that season that increased his minutes per game. Once in an 80-game season, Wilt played 79 complete games and didn't rest once. He missed only 8 minutes of the 80th game because he had been ejected by the referee. Other than that, he played every single moment of every game that entire season. Frank McGuire, the once head coach of Wilt Chamberlain, was quoted to say, "When Wilt came in to join the team, I asked him how long he'd like to play, and Wilt said, 'Forever.' I almost fell out of my chair. I said, 'No, Wilt, in a game.' And he said, 'I don't ever want to come out of a game.' And so he didn't." With all of this being said, take a moment to imagine having to guard a player who stood 7 foot 1 inches tall, who had a 7 foot 8 inch wingspan, who had speed like LeBron James, power like Shaquille O'Neal, and the ability to leap through the roof like Russell Westbrook. And oh yeah, he never went to the bench. It sounds like you might be burdened with guarding Wilt Chamberlain. In the history of the NBA, there have been thousands of triple-doubles, and there will continue to be many more. In NBA history, only 4 players have ever achieved the illustrious quadruple-double, and the most recent one was nearly 3 decades ago. Accomplishing that feat is historic and remarkable enough in itself, but then there's the quintuple-double, a feat so absurdly difficult to achieve that it seems utterly impossible outside the realm of video games. In the history of the NBA, no one has ever officially recorded a quintuple-double. Emphasis on officially, because on March 18, 1968, in a 30-point victory over the Los Angeles Lakers, Wilt Chamberlain led his Philadelphia 76ers with apparently 53 points, 32 rebounds, 14 assists, 11 steals, and 24 blocks on 82.8% shooting. Needless to say, that's insane. Before you guys discredit his competition, Wilt played this game up against the Lakers starting center Mel Counts, a pretty good player, a 7-footer, and a 2-time champion. Now the stats that are highlighted green are indisputable. These are officially recorded statistics from this game. Anyone can look up the details online. Now the key here is the blocks and steals. Did those actually happen? Unfortunately, like almost all of Wilt Chamberlain's greatest performances, there is no available footage of this game, so there's no way to visibly verify whether or not these actually took place. But that takes us to the next part of the story, which very few people talk about concerning this game, and it's actually about someone other than Wilt Chamberlain. His name is Harvey Pollock. Harvey was an inspirational pioneer for NBA statisticians. He worked in the NBA for an incredible 69 seasons, which spanned from the very birth of the league until his death in 2015. Throughout his career, he had many jobs and purposes, including being the PR director for the Warriors, the writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer,
So if anybody's wondering why we've had him introduce this gentleman here 3 times, it's because this video is a compilation of different Wilt Chamberlain videos that he's put out over time with some new stuff added to it. So he's basically just taking all his videos, like he said earlier in the video, and piecing it together. I forgot he did explain that in the beginning of the video. My bad.
Associated Press, United Press International, and of course, he was a statistician. At one point, he had all of these jobs simultaneously. Harvey was an eyewitness to more basketball games than I will ever see, and among those were some of the most significant games in NBA history, including Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game in 1962, which Harvey was responsible for accumulating the stats of, and he was the one who took the photo of Wilt's iconic moment. So that's cool and all, but what does Harvey have to do with Wilt Chamberlain's rumored quintuple-double? Well, for those of you who didn't know, the NBA did not officially track blocks and steals until the 1973-74 season, which means many triple-doubles were missed, and any quadruple-doubles or even quintuple-doubles that may have occurred prior to 1974 were completely lost in the game's history. That's a real travesty when you consider the all-time great big men who played in that era, like Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, Walt Bellamy, and Nate Thurmond, just to name a few. Makes you wonder how many incredible performances flew completely under the radar as a result. Now here's the thing. As the Philadelphia Reporter, Harvey Pollock recognized the value of things that went beyond the official stat sheet, and he was keeping track of shot distance, blocks, and steals way before it was an official stat. He had numerous reports and box scores that factored in these statistics. Unfortunately, he threw most of them away, seeing that they seemed insignificant at the time since they were not yet recognized as official stats. Fortunately, some have been preserved, and among those 112 games, Wilt averaged about 8.8 blocks per game. I'll post a link to those stats in the video's description. Harvey was the one who did in fact keep track of Wilt's rumored quintuple-double game in 1968, and it was Harvey who said that Wilt put up 53 points, 32 rebounds, 14 assists, 11 steals, and 24 blocks. Now this isn't just some random person saying that Wilt Chamberlain did this. This was Harvey Pollack, a respected statistician who worked in the NBA for nearly as long as the average human lifespan. Now, since it wasn't officially recorded like stats are today, there certainly wasn't some procedures done, like there probably wasn't any verifying or double checking of the statistics. So maybe he added an unnecessary rebound or two. Maybe he credited Wilt with a steal or two that should have gone to a teammate. Or heck, maybe he even missed some statistics that should have gone to Wilt. So it's possible that this stat line is somewhat off. But how off? How many accidental additions did Harvey have to make for this not to be the most ridiculous stat line you and I have ever seen? So in conclusion, I personally believe this actually happened. I can't objectively prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that it did in fact happen, but based on the information, I believe there's more reason to believe it did happen than it didn't. This brings me to my last point. Sometimes people get on my case for how great I believe Wilt was. But consider the fact that almost the entirety of Wilt's greatness and legacy is captured only in text and stories and not on film. We have less than 1% of Wilt's career available for us to witness on footage. That's just a fraction of his career. Now imagine Michael Jordan's career in hindsight if we had less than 1% of his highlights on film. His 63 in Boston Garden? Gone. His iconic hand switch layup? Gone. The shrug game? Gone. The flu game? Gone as well. Almost all of his iconic moments and long-lasting memories would be wiped from history. And now his highlight reel would look significantly less impressive, and with those memories and images gone, he appears as simply really nice statistics and accolades, which some then draw the conclusion was just a byproduct of his era. Maybe that even becomes the catalyst for people to say that Michael Jordan was overrated. These are the disadvantages that Wilt Chamberlain has working against him and his legacy. So hopefully, if there's one thing this video accomplished, it's that it gave some of you a greater appreciation for one of the legends of the game. Let me know in the comments section where you rank Wilt Chamberlain on your all-time list.
When we talk about the legend that is Wilt Chamberlain, a lot of divisive topics tend to come up, and one of the most notable ones is how he played an insane amount of minutes. Most famously was his 48.5 minutes per game average in 1962. That's more minutes than there are in a regulation game. This was possible because of the overtime games that he played that season. Other than an instance where he had been ejected by the referee, he played every single minute of the 1961 to 62 season. I feel like I have an objective view on this topic. For one, obviously Wilt is going to have a statistical advantage by playing the entirety of basketball games. Maybe not in terms of efficiency, but certainly in terms of totals and averages. On the other hand, I do think it's worth giving Wilt credit for having the stamina and conditioning to last all 48 minutes. Because if every star could do it while remaining extremely effective, then every superstar would. So hypothetically, what if the greatest players of all time played all 48 minutes just like Wilt Chamberlain did? Assuming they had the stamina to endure that, what kind of numbers and achievements would have been possible? Well, let's dig into it, starting by looking at some of the best seasons of my other 8 GOAT candidates if they played all 48. Let's start with the face of Showtime, Magic Johnson. One of his best individual seasons was his MVP campaign in 1989, and under 48 minutes, that translates to a remarkable 28.8 points, 16.4 assists, and 10.1 rebounds on 50.9% shooting. Again, under the stress of the extra load of minutes, maybe his efficiency would suffer a bit, but at the very least, this is his per 48 minutes numbers. How about Larry Bird? One of his best seasons was in 1988, which translates to 36.8 points, 11.4 rebounds, and 7.6 assists on 50-40-90 percentages. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was a beast in 1971, and his numbers are 37.9 points, 19 rebounds, and 4 assists on 57.7% shooting. Tim Duncan had his historic run in 2003, and he's averaging north of 28 points, nearly 16 rebounds, and 5 assists on 51.3% shooting. How about Kobe's revered 05 to 06 season? In this scenario, he's putting up over 41 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists on 45% shooting. The ultimate winner, Bill Russell, had a legendary start to his career in 1958, which is now nearly 21 points, 28.4 rebounds, which is higher than anything Wilt Chamberlain ever did, and 3.7 assists on 44.2% shooting. LeBron James's best year is arguably his 2012-13 MVP campaign, where his Heat won 33 straight games, and now his numbers are 34 points, 10 rebounds, and 9 assists on 56.5% shooting. Michael Jordan has a few seasons to choose from, but arguably his statistical best was in 1987, which is now 44.5 points, 6.3 rebounds, and 5.5 assists on 48.2% shooting. This is the list of my GOAT candidates. Which of their individual seasons stand out the most? The funny thing is, although these are the players that are most often seen as the greatest, there is arguably much stronger stat lines, especially in recent years. Luka Doncic, in only his second season, had a per 48 stat line of 41 points, 13 rebounds, and 12 assists on 46.3% shooting. That makes Oscar Robertson's triple-double season look cute by comparison. Another example is James Harden's 18-19 season with the Rockets, which was a stat line of an insane 47.2 points, 9.8 assists, and 8.7 rebounds on 47.2% shooting. And finally, Giannis's historic 2020 season with 46 points, 21 rebounds, and 9 assists on 55.3% shooting. When you look at this per 48-minute stat line from Giannis, we begin to understand how the numbers Wilt Chamberlain put up in his prime were actually possible. What's interesting is that even if you prorate every season to 48 minutes, Wilt Chamberlain's 1962 season still is the highest scoring season of NBA history. What's also interesting is how 4 out of the top 6 spots all happen to be within the last 4 seasons. As far as rebounds, Bill Russell now takes the top spot. Between Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain, they own the top 17 seasons of NBA history. The top 25 spots are all owned by players from the 1960s, which really tells you how inflated the rebounding numbers were during that era. Concerning assists per game, John Stockton owns the top 4 spots, with some truly absurd numbers. Based on this metric, he's putting up a 20-20 game with assists nearly every night. These are the top seasons in steals per game, with the extremely underrated Alvin Robertson taking 3 out of the top 5 spots on the list. I'm definitely much overdue on making his own solo video. For blocks per game, the top 4 spots of the list are owned by the 7'7" Manute Bol and the 7'4" Mark Eaton, with blocks averages that seemed only possible if your name was Wilt Chamberlain. But as you can see, some video game numbers actually become attainable when the great players play all 48 minutes. Much of what this video confirms is what I already suspected. A lot of what Wilt Chamberlain accomplished isn't actually as ridiculous as it initially sounded. But the reason why we rarely see players put up numbers like he did is because they never give themselves the opportunity to in the first place because they have limited minutes. Although Wilt Chamberlain is the only player to average 48 minutes per game, this minutes inflation advantage isn't pertaining to him alone. Most superstars of his era were given a workload that would be seen as preposterous by today's standards. In the current NBA, not a single player averages at least 39 minutes per game. 60 years ago, 7 superstar players averaged north of 40 minutes per game. And keep in mind, that was at a time when the NBA had less than 1/3 of the players that it has in the league today. My takeaway from this video is that there is obviously an advantage to playing all 48 minutes. But with that being said, there's a reason why only one player has ever done it before. And maybe the fact that Wilt Chamberlain was a fantastic track athlete is part of the reason why he was able to manage such a heavy workload. It's hard to say for sure. So now it's your turn. If there was any player other than Wilt Chamberlain who was asked to play all 48 minutes, which superstar do you think would have handled that the best?
Giannis.
Let me know in the comment section below.
Giannis.
Also, shout out to Randall for suggesting this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching as always. Make sure to like and subscribe for more basketball content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Thank you, Johnny Arnett. That is a beautiful compilation of videos put together to pay homage and put some respect on the man that is Wilt Chamberlain. Shout out to Aram, by the way. Okay. I'm not going to have a whole lot to say. I really like that last segment. That is a very compelling argument given the minutes per game factor. That is a very compelling argument. I like how he laced that together. I really, really do. And used, players of the future and current, players of Wilt's futures, put it that way. Past Wilt's era, using those players and adjusting their stats for the minutes factor, and you can see it's like it's not so far fetched, is it? Is it now? But I think it is something to be said that this man is actually, like you said, the fact that you can do that, and everybody would do it if they could do it and still be able to perform at peak efficiency or something close to it without much drop off. Where fatigue isn't much of an issue, but the dude, this ties right into his physical conditioning and his shape and his athleticism. It's tied right in there. I'm not one of these people that I understand. I have been on the record saying Wilt is the hardest player to evaluate and understand and figure out, and it's unfortunate for him and the players of his era because there's just not a whole lot of video footage, and people would like to see some of these incredible feats that he put up. And it's also a shame that certain stats weren't officially recorded for these guys, but obviously they exist, that they happen. We know they were getting hella blocks, hella steals, offensive rebounds, things like that. So it's just a matter of how much. But I've seen enough video footage to see what this guy is physically able to do, and given how much time he played, how many minutes he was playing, and how, especially before he kind of moved into a different role per se, when he was the guy, always the focal point, the guy doing all the heavy lifting. Like the dude was a monster. So I've seen enough arguments for Wilt Chamberlain. I've seen enough video footage, well, not as much as I would like to see, but to be like, yeah, he probably did all this. I don't. It's astronomical numbers. They're crazy, but there's not enough there for me to say this didn't happen. And like he said, possibly could some of the numbers be a little bit skewed, a little bit blurry, but really, how much of it? Then another thing is that we've had players that were alive during Wilt's time, and people that are still alive today, but I've never heard a single person say that none of this stuff ever happened, like Wilt didn't do any of this stuff, or it's exaggerated. I've never heard a single person say that. Never, ever, ever, ever. Don't you think, and people question his 100-point game, it's like, don't you think that one of these people would have came out and said that's BS? And all the other games that we watched on this video that were just mind-blowing numbers. And listen, the segment about Wilt's exaggerating, that was actually funny. Tell me, Wilt, how many this? How many that? What's your vertical, Wilt? 50 plus inches, you say? But you know what? The guy was a monster, man. An absolute monster. That's all I gotta say about it, man. Shout out to all the Wilt Chamberlain fans out there. Shout out to Johnny Arnott for putting this together. This is very well done and very informative. Very and shout out to, I can't remember his name, the statistician, Pollock, I think his last name was. Shout out to him, man, for holding it down, man. Holding it down with the unofficial records, bro. Holding it down. I didn't know that 100-point game was so wild. Like, it got to the point where they were just intentional fouling, then they were intentional fouling so that Wilt could get more time with the ball. What a circus show that was. I don't know how people viewed it back then, but seeing something like that go down in today's NBA, that would be a circus show. Now you got the other team, Wilt's team, fouling you guys on the offensive end, letting you get free throws just so that they could get the ball back quickly to help Wilt score. What a circus show. Quite funny, man. Quite funny. Anyway, like I said, that's all I got to say about it. This was a good one. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for stopping in. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, stay notified, and I catch you on the next one. We out, baby.